All right. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're starting a new parak ve'elu mutarim. That is Maseches Nedarim Daf Yomi, and of course, starting at the new parak on the bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Beis. It is more of the same, speaking about Nedarim that don't work and that do work because of the distinction of that which is nadur, that which I'm able to make a promise upon, versus that which I'm not able to make a promise upon. So, for example, as we will see in our Mishnah, you can't say this piece of bread has the same status as that pig. That doesn't work because that pig is asur minei ubei, no way to get out of it. But if it's a chatos, then there's already a little bit more latitude. So let's start with our Mishnah now. And the Mishnah reads, ve'elu mutar, in the following cases are cases that would be mutar to eat that food even after you make your statement of commitment. And what would be examples? Chulin she'ochelach, if I say that this piece of bread is like your chulin, or kibasar chazir, or like the flesh of a pig, kavodas kochavim, or like that idol worship, ke'oros levuvin. Ke'oros levuvin was a type of idol worship where they would actually cut the heart out of the animal while it was alive. That's what ke'oros levuvin. I mean, that's like out of the television shows, the horror movies. But that was oros levuvin. If you say this kikar is just as usher as that thing that was being used for this avodah zarah, kenevelos, utrefos, kishkatzim, or masim, like all of these things that are halachically usher inherently, kichalas aron v'chitrumaso, in all of those cases mutter, your hatfasa, your association between that which is yours that you would like to make a condition upon, and the items that you're making that condition with, if those things are inherently usher, the halacha is mutter. That is not considered a hatfasa, and nothing is binding. That's part one of the Mishnah. Part two of the Mishnah, ha'omer le'ishto, harei at alai ki'ima. Now, in general, this is not a good phrase to say to one's wife, but the phrase here is being said in the form of a neder. A man says, you are to me as my mother is to me. And of course, he's not allowed to be with his mother. Does this work? Says the Gemara, if a person says that poschen lo pesach mimakom acher, we try and undo this type of neder from another place. We'll discuss this at a later point, the makom acher place. And the Gemara says that we don't undo it in a regular way. We try to undo this in some way, shape, and form. Why? Shelo yakel rosho lekach, so that a person doesn't get accustomed to making these kinds of claims. What's going on in this last part of the Mishnah is that we're talking about a person who's an Am Ha'aretz. Apparently with Amei Aratzim, and for people who don't have a lot of foresight, they make these commitments against their spouses. I'm so angry at you. I'm halachically considering our relationship like me and my mother, which is that there's obviously a halachic limitation. So that if a husband says that out of frustration, then Am Ha'aretz, because the Talmud Chacham would never say that. But if an Am Ha'aretz says that, the halacha is poschen lo pesach mimakom acher. The Mefarshim explain that normally when we try to undo a neder, the way that we show charata by a neder is by saying, if only I would have known X, I would never have done this. That's what the charata is. Here we don't say that. Here we try and find another loophole, and the Rishonim discuss this. Let's make a diuk from the beginning of the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Taima, the reason why in our Mishnah we said that it's mutter, why there's no neder created when I take my kikar of challah and compare it to chulin, is because chulin she'ochelach, but ha'amar lichulin or lachulin, then she'ochelach mashma lo lechulin lehave. It seems to say that it should not be like chulin, implying backhandedly that if it's not chulin, then it's hektish. El korban, and money must nisan, by definition, that cannot be Rav Meir. Again, as mentioned earlier when I started, this parak is more of the same, at least in the beginning. It can't be Rav Meir because we learned about Rav Meir already. Rav Meir, as we turn to the top of Yodal and Amud Aleph. If in fact the diuk of this Gemara is correct, that the Gemara is being medayik from our Mishnah, that had we said lachulin she'ochelach, and there it implies that he said lo lechulin lehave ela korban, that's a backhanded inference. We're inferring from a negative. Rav Meir doesn't allow that. Must be Rabbi Huda. If you want to say that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Huda, well, that's double. That's duplicative. Why? Because Hainu Reisha, we learned that in the previous parak already about Rabbi Huda. So what have we learned new? So says the Gemara, a couple of answers. Answer number one is Aidi Diktani. Besar chazir kavodas kochavim lahachik tani chulin. Just because the other, there's nothing to be learning from the word chulin. We just said it because it happens to be in the same category. Your Rebbe learned about chulin already. You're 100% correct. No diukim to be made. It was only mentioned because it came along with the package. It came along with everything else. Ravina argues, no, Amar Hachik Tani, really, here's how we should understand our Mishnah, the Mishnah at the beginning of the parak. Ve'elu mutarin kichulin. Look back at our Mishnah. Ve'elu mutarin kichulin. Just add the letter kaf to the Mishnah. The following things are mutarin, namely, if I try hatfasa between my corned beef and all of these items that are inherently asur, it'll be no different than a hatfasa with chulin. And then the Gemara continues, so Ravina, they argue a little, but you're right, they both agree that no diuk should be made. But Ravina is of the opinion that we're using chulin as the paradigm for that which does not work in a neder. Says the Gemara, that's a problem. The ilotana chulin, had it been that our Mishnah did not have chulin, Havamina by Sheila. I might have thought that because it doesn't exist in our Mishnah, I might have made an inference, says the Gemara, that I might have needed Sheila in regards to chulin if I tried to make a neder there. Could it be that anyone would assume that we would have needed Sheila, we would have needed charata to undo the neder by chulin? Absolutely not. Hamidikatani Seifa. Because the Seifa says the following. Remember our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? Ha'omer li'ishto hare'at alai ki'ima poschon lo pesach mimakom acher. We see in the Seifa of our Mishnah that our Seifa says that if an Am Haaretz husband makes this line, he says that you, my wife, are no different to me than the way that I am related to my mother. There the Gemara says poschon lo pesach mimakom acher. We try and undo his neder, which basically is sheila. That's undoing the neder. Michlal the reisha lo by a sheila. And if the seifa is dealing with sheila of undoing a neder, then the reisha must not be dealing with that. So how can you say your inference is correct? That had it not said chulin in our Mishnah, maybe we would have needed sheila. Therefore, we reject Ravina's answer. Elamachvarta chulin memela nasba. Chulin was just included automatically, and that was the answer of the Gemara on the second line of Aidi de Ketani Kibsar Chazir Kiavodas Chochavim, that we also included chulin. Says the Gemara, Minohani Mili. Where do we know this from? This Minohani Mili is a little bit out of left field, and thank you to the Ran for helping us out. The Ran is a third of the way down. Dibur Hamaschel Minohani Mili. And the Ran says, defining this question in the Gemara, Minohani Mili Timatfis Bedavar Ha'asar Lo Mitzar. That one who does hatfasa, that one who tries to take his item, his corned beef, his kikar, and tries to compare it to something that's inherently asur, how do we know lo mitzar? How do we know that neder is not binding? Because we've been making this assumption. We discussed this already the last many blot, that if I try to make a comparison between something that's asur and not something that's a davar hanadur, we said that it doesn't work. So where do we know this from? Says the Gemara, that's simple. Amar Kra, Ishki Yidor Neder Lashem. We see the word Yidor and Neder, a doubling of the language. What do we learn from the extra Neder? Ad Yidor Bedavar Hanadur. But that's what the double language is, that the neder has to be something that's nadur, something that I could make a neder upon to make it asur. A pig, I don't have to make a neder to make it asur. I can't make a neder to make it asur. I can't change its status one iota. It's just what it is. So it can't be something like that. That's the drush of the Gemara. That's how we know that when we're matfis something, that it can only be with something that's bedavar hanadur, that which I'm able to impact its status from mutter to asur. Masha'en kain, all the examples in our Mishnah, which are dvarim ha'asurim, and therefore the neder doesn't function. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Ihachi, if that's true, afilu b'davar asur nami. If that's true that you're learning from the double language of Yidor Neder LaHashem, well, dehaksiv le'asor isar al nafsho. We have another pasuk that has a doubling language of isar. Maybe we should therefore assume that just like we're able to be matvis with something that's b'davar hanadur because we have a double language of Yidor Neder, well, we also have a doubling language of isar, which is la'asor isar, and maybe there too we can learn out. Maybe there too we can learn out that a person can be matvis b'davar ha'asur. Says the Gemara, that's not true, because the words la'asor isar are actually used for something else. We need that for something else, which is ezu isar ha'amor b'torah, which is how do we create hatfasa in the first place? How do I make this piece of bread that I'm saying by association is similar to something else? How do I make that asur? That's the mari makom that we have atfasa. So the word la'asor isar is actually not available to be used for this drasha. And therefore, the Gemara concludes that the reason how we know that hatfasa only works by something that's bedavar hanadur is based on the pasuk of ishki yidor neder laHashem. Because of the extra language of yidor neder, the doubling of the language of neder, therefore the Gemara darshans at sheyidor bedavar hanadur. All of that deals with the reisha of our Mishnah. What about the seif of our Mishnah? Let's dig in. We're 2/3 of the way down on Yud Daled Amud Aleph. We're going to be going to the Mishnah 2/3 of the way down on Yud Daled Amud Beis. Reminder that tomorrow I'm out of town. In Yirtzeh Hashem, I'll be posting a recording mid-morning. If I don't fall asleep on the plane, then I'll be posting mid-morning. And then we should be done. Otherwise, I'll have to squeeze in a time later. So let's learn the second part of our Mishnah 2/3 of the way down in Yud Daled Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, HaOmer leishto harei at alai ki'ima. Says the Gemara, you had said in our Gemara that seems to be that you have to do she'ela. Our Mishnah said that poschen lo pesach mimakom acher, but says the Gemara that doesn't always seem to work out because we're in minhu. We have a source in the Tanaim that doesn't agree with our Mishnah. If a person says harei at alai kibisar ima, that you are to me like the flesh of the mother, or kibisar achosi, like the flesh of my sister, Ke'orla, like a tree in its first 3 years, completely off limits, uchikilai hakerem, like foods that are growing in the vineyard that should not be growing there, lo amar klum. So that's a stira. How is it that over here you can say bisar ima and it's lo amar klum, the neder is a 0, but in our Mishnah you said ke'ima, and all of a sudden you have to be poschen pesach mimakom acher, stira. So here we're going to see two answers. Answer number 1 is that of Abaye. Amar Abaye, lo amar klum midoraisa. Tzarich she'ela midrabanan. This is the chakira. Our Mishnah, which seems to say that there is some form of she'ela, that's only true midrabanan. Midoraisa, clean slate, 100%. If a man says harei at alai ki'ima, midoraisa, that's not a neder. Midrabanan, we're makbid on you because that's not the right way to talk. So we force your hand to go undo your neder, but really it's not a neder. The neder is only rabbinic in nature. Mashein came, this brisa is just speaking brass tacks without even including anything else. What does the brisa say? The brisa says, lo amar klum, midoraisa. That's correct, midoraisa. So that's the nafkamina between the two mishnayos. However, Rava argues. Rava amar no, ha b'talmidei chachamim, ha be'am haaretz. It depends. When we're talking about an Am Haaretz, he gets a slap on the wrist. That's our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is where an Am Haaretz said, Harei atalai ki'ima. And under those circumstances, what do we see? We see that our Mishnah says that he has to go chase down the Bezdin, and he has to do she'ela, he has to undo his neder, even though the neder is not a full neder. But it's only true by Amei Aratzim. It's not true by Talmidei Chachamim. If a Talmid Chacham says that about his wife, Harei atalai ki'ima, you are no different to me than my mother, so then under those circumstances, lo amar klum. That's as if he said nothing, nothing is binding, no rabbinic injunction upon him to undo that particular neder. And where do we see this from? V'hatanya. We know that when we see v'hatanya, is that hey in v'hatanya, a hey hasha'ela that's asking a question or not? And here the Gemara says, just for Hatanya, and it's actually benichusa, which would be Rashi's language, which we're familiar with. This is a raya. 3 lines from the bottom on Yud Daled Amud Aleph, the Gemara says Hatanya, hanoder batorah. We'll discuss this case in a minute. But a person who makes a commitment about their product, and they say it's going to be usher like Torah or whatever the hatfasa is, lo amar klum. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, v'tzarach she'ela l'chacham. So here we see the distinction between a Talmid Chacham and a non-Talmid Chacham. When is it in the case of Noder Batorah that we need to do some type of She'elas Chacham? That's only by an Am Haaretz. So the precedence for our case is found here. Just like in the case of Noder Batorah, Lo Amar Klum. And if you're a Talmid Chacham, you don't need to do any rabbinic type of hafara, of She'ela. So too in our case, and what is our case of Harei atalai ki'ima? If you're a Talmid Chacham, then there's no need to do any hafara. What's the reason behind what? Oh, it was an uncommon language by Talmidei Chachamim. The Amei Haaretz were much quicker to say these kinds of things about their spouses. That's what the Ran says earlier on the previous Amud. The Ran was concerned about this because it was their parlance, and first of all, the language doesn't work. So Midoraisa, the language doesn't work. The concern of our Mishnah, as the Ran explains, is that he's going to keep saying these kinds of things in his marriage. It's going to be bad. We slap him on the wrist. You can't talk like that. You can't talk like sometimes our kids will say things that they don't pass the smell test. There's nothing usher about it. It's just not pasnished. It's not the right way to talk. You lost 10 minutes of iPad. I do that at home sometimes. Like if I hear a language that I don't like and they know that it's a language that we don't use, 10 minutes off. Not just a slap on the wrist. It's not even, it's a nothing, but they gotta keep it on the up and up. It's not right. So similarly here, the Amei Haaretz, that's how the Ran explained our Mishnah. If you can look in the Ran, it's a pretty lengthy Ran, but take a look over there. The Ran Dibur Hamaschil Haomer Liishto on the bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Beis gets into some of the details over here about who we're talking about. But it's not a common language. So therefore lo amar klum. Yeah, but hopefully when you're having a fight with your wife and you're a Talmud Chacham, you shouldn't be doing it in front of an Am Haaretz. That's like one of the things. I'm running a parenting program at the OU. The best parenting advice you're going to have is to have a great marriage. Because kids will learn, they learn now conflict resolution. They see husbands and wives fight. You get the true colors. Are you really passive aggressive? Like, are you not? You're not a mensch. Like, can you talk nicely? Just be above the board. Like, just talk normal. I don't agree with you. Let's talk it out and let's move on. Let's do it the right way. Okay, done with my OU promotions. I almost never do that. That was rare. Okay, let's go. Says the Gemara. We're at the top of the next page. That was the answer of. That was the second answer. That was the answer of Rava, of the distinction of Talmud Chacham, giving a raya of the distinction between a Talmud Chacham and an Am Haaretz. Let's get into the case that we saw. It says Tanya here, but according to some Girsos in the Gemara, by the way, this is not dissimilar to Shkalim, where there's a lot of textual corrections to be made as well. Not just weird language, but corrections as well. Gufa, what did we just learn? Hanoder b'Torah lo amar klum. So we're going to learn this brisa. That's part one of the brisa, that a person who makes a neder b'Torah, Rashi, Mefarish, Dibur Masul Hanoder b'Torah, she'ochelach, that of yours, lo amar klum. So I make a neder using the Torah as my leverage that I will eat your food or not eat your food, lo amar klum. But if I don't refer to the Torah broadly and I refer to the psukim inside the Torah, then dvarav kayamin. Okay, so not broad but specific. What about ba uba meshekasuba? What if I say I'm going to place a restriction on myself between me and you because of the Torah and what's in the Torah? Says the Gemara, dvarav kayamin. And the Gemara asks a question. Katani, we already learned in our Mishnah, in the middle phrase of that brisa, we already learned in this brisa at the top of this page. What did we learn? That if in fact a person says that whatever is in the Torah, that's my leverage to make the neder, we said that works. So then why is it that you had to say the third phrase? What was the third phrase? Ba uba meshakasuba tzarech l'meimar. That should have been very obvious. If when I say what's in the Torah is binding, then when I say the Torah and what's in the Torah, of course it should be binding. The Gemara presents three answers, and these three answers will take us to the Mishnah, and then we'll stop for the day. Amar Rav Nachman, answer number one, lo kasha. Hadamachta oraisa a'ara. One is when the Torah was not in his hand. The Gemara says that the Torah was resting on the ground. It obviously doesn't mean resting on the ground. It means that it's just not in his hands. Strange turn of phrase, probably requires its own research, but that is what the Gemara says. So that's when you say the phrase when you're not holding the Torah, that's one thing. And when you're holding it in your hand, that's different. And machta al ara daiti agvile, when you're holding the Torah, when the Torah is on the ground, when the Torah is on the bima, let's say daiti agvile, then your intent is on the gvil, on the white part of the Torah, the sanctity of the parchment. But when you're actually holding the Torah, daita al ha'azkaro sheba, then it's talking about the psukim, about the shemos of Hashem. Also requires rishonim. Why is it that when you're not holding a Torah and you make reference to a Torah, we're talking about the gvil, we're talking about the white part? And why is it that when you're holding the Torah, we're not talking about the white part, we're talking about the ink? These are phrases we should be somewhat familiar with from Shas and certainly from halachic svarim, that letters have to be mukaf gvil. Like if sometimes the Baal Koreh, nobody likes when the Baal Koreh leans in to check a letter. It makes everyone uncomfortable because, oh no, we have to start leaning over from another Sefer Torah. Go find another Baal Koreh so he doesn't find any mistakes. This happened to us on an NCSY Shabbaton. We were in the middle of laning. We noticed that a word was missing two letters. Pashut, not there. The Sofer left out like it was a plural word of like something with a chaf and a mem at the end, like lachem. It should have been like bishvilchem. That's not whatever. Never placed there in the first place. A total psul d'oraisa. It was a zero. Nothing. No space for them. Nothing. I couldn't believe it. Two letters. Very, very, very. Anyways, I was like one of the rabbinic people there. And I walked over to the Torah. I'm like, let's make sure, get me a chumash. You guys, we're not messing around here. And Taka was true. We checked it a few times, not just my eyes, other people too. Torah was puzzled. So then they said, well, Rabbi Phil, you should know the answer to halachic questions. So should we do Haftorah? So I knew very little about this, but I said the only thing I know about Haftorah is that it was a separate gzeira, and you probably should say the Haftorah was based on a time when there was a Shas Shema. What?
Because you never know the separate
Done.
That's why you rest. That's why you rest.
Right. Couldn't finish laning. So we stopped. We stopped right in the middle, and then they said, "What should we do about Haftorah?" So I said, from what I understand, you probably should do Haftorah. The Haftorah is not necessarily tied directly. I was wrong. They said Haftorah, they're all brachos lebatal. You're not allowed to do Haftorah if you don't like.
When they couldn't.
That was exactly my svara.
Why would they be a bracha lebatal? They still learn the navi of that.
He didn't say it's a bracha lebatal, but it might have been. I don't know. It certainly is.
So you wouldn't follow if you couldn't lane, you just lose it all.
But it makes just because of the fundamental way of how Haftarah was created, it just sounded strange to me. But I was wrong. Right. Anyways, that was how the NCS Spice Torah got written. Yeah, Moshe Eisenberg capitalized on that like a maggot on meat. He was like, oh, and they made like $250,000. They made a lot of money off of that. Oh, stunning. That was answer number one. Answer number two, a third of the way down. The Iba Yisema, the Machta al Ara. Really, the Torah is resting not in my arms, but it's on the bima. V'akamash malan. The afal gav de Machta al Ara. Kevan de Amar b'mashe kasuba mahani. V'zu ve'ein tzarech lomar zuktani. The Gemara says no chiddush. It's just saying this and even that, and don't think that the introduction of two ideas in one sentence of both the Torah and the Azkaros Sheba should ruin it. No, they're both viable ways of creating a neder. And the third answer, halfway down, the Iba Yisema, Kula Mitzi Asa Nami the Nakit Lebiyada. Really, the middle case and the last case are talking about where you're holding on to it. But Kamash Malan, that in the second and third cases of the Brisa, what does it come to teach us? Came on the Nakit Lebiyade, since you're holding it in your hands. Afal Gav de Lo Amar Ba, even if you didn't say the Torah itself, Kamanda Amar B'Masha Kasu Badami. So Chiddush was the middle case. The middle case is where you're holding the Torah and you just say Ba. But because you said Ba, we assume that you're not just talking about the Torah itself, but even the Azkaros Sheba. So that's how the Gemara gets out of this question of Hanoder b'Torah Lo Amar Klum. There, if you just say that alone, it's nothing. But once you say B'Masha Kasu Ba, whatever is written in it, as long as you're holding the Torah, then that is going to be binding. So if you're ever the Chazan, don't make any commitments while you're holding the Torah. You could mamish have a neder doraisa, because if you say, yeah, based on what's in the Chumash, so then very dangerous. We'll stop right here. I will not be in person tomorrow, assuming my flight's on time on Thursday. Should be back in time. If there's any problems, I'll let you all know through WhatsApp. Wishing you all a beautiful night.